Christians, I made a post where I quote Jesus saying that the law and the prophets prophesied until John. John the Baptist was the last of the prophets who were called to prophesy with biblical infallibility. To which my friend here says John was the last under the law, which is not what Jesus said. It's not what Jesus said. But let's move on. He says John was the last under the law, but not under the new covenant. So his assumption is that under the new covenant, there are new prophets, which there are not. Now, this guy's logic is this, that if this is the case, that if what I'm saying is the case, then pastors are obsolete as well. Here's what Christians you need to understand, like this gentleman needs to understand, and he doesn't understand. In spite of all of his telling me about how educated he is in Greek and Aramaic and in classic Hebrew, which I don't believe he is. However, that being aside, regardless of his supposed education, here's what I will say. Everything becomes obsolete. We don't need apostles and we don't need prophets. They have become obsolete. And here's what I mean. They have become obsolete because God has given us his entire counsel in the Word of God, which is a result and could not be finished until Christ came here and fulfilled his mission on earth. After which, his mission and his doings and his dealings with mankind would be afforded to be cataloged in the books of the Bible, particularly those in the New Testament. And since we have this New Testament Word of God, since we have the fulfillment of Christ being the fulfillment of all of these types and figures and the fulfillment of the law, we no longer need any more aids in the form of apostles and prophets because we have the infallible Word of God. If a person is a prophet or a apostle, in the biblical sense of it, they would speak things that were coming directly from God, and they would therefore be infallible. They would be the Word of God that was divinely inspired. So what he is saying, what he is supposing is this, is that since pastors are in continuance today, then therefore he concludes that apostles and prophets would also have to be in use today, when the Word of God has fulfilled clearly the role of what the apostles and the prophets were needed for, which was to convey biblical or to convey truths, infallible truths from God to be communicated to God's people. So the only necessity that there would be for a prophet and an apostle outside of authenticating the Word of God, the only other reason why we would need them is because we don't have an adequate offering of truth as has been conveyed to us in the 66 books of the Bible. The only reason why we would need a prophet is because God is not done telling us what we need to know. The only reason why we would need a prophet, let me say this again, the only reason we would need a prophet to convey to us the infallible Word of God is if the infallible Word of God that we have embodied in the 66 books of the Bible is not sufficient. Pastors are not trying to convey to us the infallible Word of God outside of what's in the scriptures. So let me ask my friend here and anyone else who would offer up some logic like this, which is silly, by the way. What is the significance of the Word of God? Why do we need the Bible if we have prophets who can give us the infallible Word of God? What is it, a prophet today, or an apostle for that matter? What is a prophet or an apostle going to tell us more that we have to treat infallibly than what the Word of God already gives us? So, my friend, whatever education it is you think you got and that you brag about to me about, I want to know what it is you're going to tell me, or what one of your prophets are going to tell me, or if you consider yourself a prophet, what are you going to tell me and the rest of us who are believers that the Word of God does not already tell us? And unless you can tell us that they can say something to us that they get directly from God, that they can tell us something different that they receive directly from God that is in the Word of God, that is not in the Word of God, I want to know what you think that would be. And if you have any experiences that you could convey to us, or any words that you could convey to us that God told you or someone else that we should consider to be infallible and can be added to the Word of God. Because if you or anyone else says they are a prophet and that they are receiving revelation directly from God, you would have to also admit and say that the Word of God itself is not sufficient and is not complete. Otherwise, every other thing that would tell us anything that the Word of God, that would tell us anything additional to the Word of God, we would have to say is obsolete. Because the Word of God itself, the 66 books of the Bible, renders the need for prophetic utterances to be obsolete. Be provoked and be persuaded.